Welcome back to Racing Across America. Wednesday morning means a visit from Jeremy Plonk, horseplayernow.com and Countdown to the Crown. Good morning, Jeremy.
Good morning, Seth. Great to be here.
And I touted again at the top of the program. It's if you want to follow the Derby Trail, and it is definitely fun at this time of year because it's starting to come together, and some of the names that we have to pay attention to are bubbling up. But there's no better way to do it than Countdown to the Crown, countdowntothecrown.com. Your package comes out every Friday. Previews of important three-year-old races, recaps of races that have already been run, a top 20 list as well. You do a great job, and I'm assuming the workload is probably at this time of year because you're also funneling in maiden races and allowance races. This is probably the heaviest time workload-wise.
It is, and it really helps to set me up for the rest of the spring because you watch all these maiden and allowance horses, and they develop or they continue in the maiden and allowance ranks. And when those divisions thin out a little bit later in the spring, in March and April, you'll have some good bet-back horses that are facing easier competition. So, it's gone well, and, we have the picks in the countdown, and we had a win in 2 seconds last week from 3 races we gave out. And for the season in our Horse Player Now Buzz Report, we're looking at horses in some of those maiden and allowance races, and we're 5 for 11 giving out horses there. So it's been helpful, it's been beneficial. And when you follow one thing, I know it's national, but when you follow one division, all I'm looking for is maiden special and allowance races in the 3-year-old male rank. It's actually really good handicapping study to kind of focus on one kind of division, just like you would if you just followed one local racetrack. And you really get to know those horses intimately and who beat whom and how they did it and how they look.
Very good. All right, let's get into some of the action because we got a full slate here. Got some stakes action, got a maiden, got an allowance, and then we're going to look forward to a couple of stakes at Gulfstream this Saturday as well, so plenty to talk about. And let's go back to Fairgrounds as they kicked off their 3-year-old trail on Saturday with the Lecomte. We talked a little bit about this last week because we talked about that crazy maiden effort from Run Happy. And it seemed like stepping into the Lecomte, maybe, they maybe got a little bit ambitious, and it seemed to turn out that way. We'll watch the Lecomte here. Number 7, Run Happy, disappoints at 5-1, running a badly beaten 9th in here and bumped around, caused a little trouble. Eagle, the 3-1 favorite, winds up 7th. But it is International Star, the number 1 horse, winning pretty nicely at 9-1. War Story runs 2nd. Tis Now RJ, the horse I liked in here, runs, I thought, an okay 3rd, but certainly Ken Ramsey and International Star back on the Derby Trail in a big way.
Yeah, just like last year with Vickers in Trouble. They won this race, and now they kind of doubled down with it. And Vickers in Trouble was coming last year out of, a Louisiana-bred race and into open company. This horse, International Star, had better running lines. It faced better competition than what we saw with Vickers in Trouble. So it was a little bit less of a wild card, but nonetheless, there seemed to be some better options on paper going into this race. But coming out of it, this was a nice win. The horse was stuck behind horses at the top of the stretch, had to tilt out and get around them. Extremely roughly run race. I mean, from the beginning, the 2 Dorochenko horses, both about 90-1. One broke inward, one broke outward, took half the gate with them, from the 5 and the 9 hole, and just wiped out everything in between. And that's what happened to Run Happy. Run Happy got shuffled around at the start, got an attitude about it. He's an inexperienced and quirky horse to start with, as we saw in that Turfway debut, and then ran off with the jockey. I mean, the horse went from 10th to 1st in 2 furlongs, took the lead down the backstretch, and then completely ran out of gas. Seth, this is one of the strangest run races I've ever seen. Go back and watch the replay and count how many horses make the lead in this race. There are 7. 7 different horses had the lead at some point in the horse race. I've never seen that before in my life. It was absolutely a bizarrely run race. I mean, it was kind of like we used to do this thing in high school athletics. We called it an Indian run. Whoever was in the lead, then the person in the back of the pack had to run up to the front, and then the person in the back had to run, and you ran around the field that way. This is how this race ran, and it was kind of like whoever had the ball last was going to win it, and it was kind of strange. And so I have no idea how to evaluate the race from a fundamental standpoint. You kind of look at the horses and say, did I see spots of talent in the race from individual horses? And that's almost the way you have to look at it.
Yeah, it was definitely quirky. There's no question about it, and it's going to be interesting to see how some of these horses go forward. Like I say, I like Tis Now RJ, and I didn't think that was a bad effort from him. But
no, I agree with you. I think if there is one horse in this field that you come out of feeling best about, it's Tis Now RJ, because he was up part of that weird pace, 5, 6 different horses taking a shot at him, and he was still punching in the lane, and he leaned all over a worse story. The second and third place finishers, if you watch the head-on replay, the two of them were bouncing off each other the whole length of the stretch, and yet still runs a good race with, relatively inexperienced. He's in good hands with Asmussen. So I think that Cisnao RJ is the best prospect out of this field. And Eagle was so disappointing. I mean, he was one of those horses who didn't have a whole lot of trouble. But there's one thing with Eagle that we got to watch. And Run Happy, when he went berserk from the back of the pack trying to scoot up and go through the field, wiped out Eagle a little bit on the first turn. Very similar to what we saw with Candy Boy in the Kentucky Derby. If you kind of remember that first turn trip, there's a possibility that Eagle got stepped on maybe because the way he kind of went sideways and got hit in that first turn and then never lifted a foot the rest of the race. I want to watch and see when Eagle gets back on the workout tab. If he's not back on the workout tab in 10 to 12 days, something's up there, and he might have gotten stepped on, and, maybe you give him a mulligan for this effort, but boy, was it disappointing.
Yeah, that's interesting because it does seem like a little bit of an aberration off what we saw and expected. All right, let's go out to California, Northern California on Saturday. California Derby for $100,000, mile and a 16th on the synthetic at Golden Gate. And the favorite in here was Soul Driver from Jeff Mullins. This one was coming off some turf efforts down in Southern California. Jerry Hollendorfer with a couple of horses in here. Stand and Salute, Russell Bayes on board. Comes out of a win in the Gold Rush. You also had another, the longer Jerry Hollendorfer, Cross the Line, who had been improving in 3 starts so far in the career. Broughton Kitten came in for Wesley Ward, also off a turf effort down in Southern California. And it's going to wind up as we watch the stretch run. The other Hollendorfer, number 1, Cross the Line, gets it done at 9-2. Soul Driver, the 2-1 favorite, the 5-horse runs second. Stand and Salute runs third, and Broughton Kitten runs fourth in here. Not a bad effort from Cross the Line, but again, this is on the synthetic up in Northern California. What do you make of these going forward?
Yeah, this race has kind of had a little hit or miss history going to the El Camino Real Derby. It's the local prep, but typically the last 4 years, it's been a horse coming off the turf at Santa Anita who comes up and wins that El Camino Real Derby. And based on what I saw here, I'm not so sure that doesn't happen again. That one of the SoCal horses next time are just better. Soul Driver was decent from Southern California coming up early for this race, and he ran on pretty even terms with Cross the Line much of the way. This is your difference in trip handicapping and your trackers and all that other stuff. Soul Driver decided to stay on the rail. Cross the Line went out to the 3 path. They were moving together. Soul Driver got stopped just a little bit. Cross the Line got first run on him by going 3 wide. Sometimes going wide, you don't lose momentum. You want to lose length or momentum, and that's the difference between going inside and outside sometimes. And Cross the Line got first run. But then once clear, Soul Driver really didn't make any of the impact, dent the impact at all in the margin. So, you expected once he did get clear that it would kind of cut into that margin of Cross the Line. Cross the Line kind of ran away from him and galloped out pretty well. So, I think the winner was the best horse in the race, it turns out. He's just an improving sort. Is he going to be good enough to beat the El Camino Real Derby horses who come in, from Southern California, the better ones? Maybe not. And, will this be a horse that we talk about for the Kentucky Derby down the line? Probably not again. I mean, his mare is a half to behaving badly, who's a really good sprinter for Bob Baffert. There's not a whole lot of distance pedigree there. So they got the mile and a 16th, but do they go to a mile and an 1/8 and a mile and a quarter? Probably not.
All right, let's shift our attention now to the Monday holiday as they kick off the 3-year-old trail down in Arkansas with the Smarty Jones, $150,000 on the line. They went a mile in this race. And this is a crazy stretch run we're going to watch here as Mr. Z is going to take the lead for Wayne Lucas. Mr. Z, the even money favorite, the number 3 horse, will take the lead and look to have a stranglehold on this race. Starts to float out, and even on that, you think, still is in front and probably will win, but will certainly finish well. And then I can't tell whether John Court stops riding or the horse gives up a little bit. At that point, you realize, they're going to pass him. With about the last 70 yards, Mr. Z re-engages and winds up holding third, but coming up inside the number 1, far right, Mike Smith on board. Finishing second was the horse I liked in here, Bayard for Steve Asmussen. So it'll be far right, Bayard, Mr. Z, 1, 2, 3. And I'd like to get your opinion, Jeremy. I was surprised the price on Far Right. 5-2 was the second choice in here. Moved down off 6-1 on the morning line. I'll tip my cap to the bettors. They had it, and I wondered if if Mike Smith in the saddle pulled a little of that price down, because otherwise I thought that 6-1 was probably about right. But he wins, certainly justifying, as I say, the bettors who did a great job. Got a great trip up the rail, as we just saw there. So Far Right steps into the picture on the Arkansas Trail.
Well, I'd like to tell you that it was the Countdown to the Crown wagering guide we put out on Monday that drove the price down. I don't know how many followers we had that actually set it in, but I did like Far Right, and I agree with you that 5-2 wasn't more. I think the horse was more of a 9-2, 5-1 kind of deal. I like this race in the Delta Jackpot. He really finished strong on that bull ring and galloped out nicely in that race, and looked like a horse that if he got a race with some pace could do some damage early in the year at Oaklawn. Because again, he was racing through the late winter, there at Delta, so he's an in-form horse. He was kind of primed for an early season race at Oaklawn, and he got that. He got a race that had a lot of pace on paper, and so it worked out. But, if you cashed on him on Monday, you're betting on an IOU next time with the racing guys, because you got a gift. There's no doubt about that Mr. Z was going on to victory if he doesn't, bolt and go herky-jerky. And so, you're fortunate. One thing is that, this wasn't something that happened for the very first time. The horse got out in the stretch in the race at Los Alamitos last time, Mr. Z, and Mike Smith decided to get off of him and ride Far Right. So, Mike Smith ships in from California and doesn't ride the horse that he rode in the Los Al Futurity. He rides the horse for Ron Moquett on the rise, and so it was a horse that he rode against in the race at Delta. So that was the situation there. I think where the agent for Mike Smith tipped the hat a little bit, and I think some of the fans kind of followed that, like you were saying. I think Smith's presence definitely is what knocked the horse down in price, and this was a pretty good effort, and it was a fortunate victory. As for Mr. Z, horses don't bear out consistently unless there's a problem. Typically, there's a problem on the other side of the suspension, if you will. In car terms, if something's wrong on the left side, you bear out all the time. If something's wrong on the right side, you bear in. And so this horse has been getting out a couple races in a row. And I think, under further examination and as things go, I think they'll probably find there's a little something wrong physically with Mr. Z making him do that. And so, I don't know. He's had a pretty hard campaign at age 2. I don't know if you can look at Mr. Z and say, if I had 200 to 1 on him in a future book right now, I don't think I would take, $5 on it, because he doesn't seem like a horse who's going to get to May. That doesn't mean he's a bad horse by any stretch. I just don't think he's going to hold up until May.
Yeah, you got a great point there, because this is, as you say, he'd done this in the Futurity prior. Not as bad just because of the situation there coming down the lane and where the other horses were. But,
right.
Boy, you thought again, you watched that, you thought, oh, he's got a stranglehold. Oh, even bearing out, he's okay. But then it also, as I said, you toss into the mix, and I'm not sure whether John Court stopped riding or the horse gave up a little bit. But boy, about mid-stretch there, he just let the other horses catch right up and go by, and then re-engaged a little bit. But, yeah, you do have to think there's probably a little something more going on there.
Give Jay Pridman some credit. He had some good reporting on this in the racing form if you link around to it a little bit. But he had mentioned that after the Los Al Futurity, the quote from Mike Smith was his left arm hurt so bad trying to keep the horse in. And so maybe Mike Smith was just strong enough to keep it from being so egregious. And also there was a horse to the outside that helped keep him penned in a little bit in the Los Al Futurity as well. With the open space behind him, maybe John Court just simply isn't as strong physically as Mike Smith, too. And that could be part of it, that, it was more pronounced under Court. And these are the subtle little things about jockeys. And, we say, oh, it's all about the horse and, the rider only accounts for a small percentage. But this could be one of those kind of cases that unless you've got a jock who's just really strong upper body, that they may have a hard time riding this horse. And again, keeping him sound is going to be, the difficult thing if he is indeed sound right now.
All right, and now let's move on. That wraps up our look at some of the stakes. But as noted, we also maidens and allowance races. And again, I'll tell people that's part of the fun. of pulling up the countdown to the Crown package, because Jeremy previews some of the races that are important to watch over the next few days after the package comes out. And this race that I'm pulling up now is one of those. You mentioned this maiden special weight at Tampa on Saturday, the 5th on Saturday at Tampa. Maiden special weight for the 3-year-olds, going 1.16 miles on the turf. And you went back to December 27th when a similar race was won by a horse named Midnight Trace that you think might have some potential. Right behind Midnight Trace that day was Replay and Docket, running 2nd and 3rd. And they're going to run 1st and 2nd in the race on Saturday, but it will be the number 3 Docket getting it done at 3-1. Number 8 Replay runs 2nd at 5-2. The favorite in here was Furious Warrior at 9-5. That runs 3rd. But again, you thought that race, Midnight Trace's race, could provide a little bit of potential, and you pointed specifically to Docket and Replay. So going forward, what do you think of those horses off of Saturday's effort?
Well, this was a good front-running effort here by Docket. I thought he looked really strong, and good connections, Owen Hardy. And the horse they beat, Midnight Trace, that you're talking about from that race, December 27th, that was the first-time starter who had a terrible post. I think he threw the 10 or 11 hole for Graham Motion and for the West Point Thoroughbred folks. Those are the same guys who last year won the Tampa Bay Derby with Ring Weekend, who was a turf horse who switched over to the dirt. So Midnight Trace now becomes one of those Tampa Bay Derby contenders that you're looking at, because that maiden win looks better after this. Obviously, he overcame a lot to win a route on the turf from a wide post in the debut. I mean, those are 3 big factors that get most horses beat. And then, again, you have the connections who won the Tampa Derby last year. So I think that gives the connections of Midnight Trace confidence going forward that, hey, we can step this horse up in class now and see what he can do. I think he's going to get thrown to the wolves a little bit. You might see him in the Sam F. Davis and then the Tampa Bay Derby. I mean, he becomes a lot more interesting prospect, and that's why I like to look at all these races, because you can kind of compare notes with the horses and the ones who beat soft fields versus the ones who beat very good fields, can move up. We don't have a lot to look at anymore on the Derby trail in terms of starts. Most of these contenders are going to get to Derby Day with 4 or 5 career starts. That's just the way they look on paper anymore. And so, comparing how they do against other folks and strength of schedule is an important thing. And Saturday's race at Tampa there for Docket definitely, made that one look good. And remember, this horse is not your typical Tampa Bay horse either. I mean, this is a really good WinStar bred horse who's, he's out of a half-sister to Well Armed, the Dubai World Cup winner. So Docket's a horse with some serious pedigree. He's a Tiz now, and he looked really good on the front end on the turf, and he's got plenty of pedigree to go over and try the dirt. I think you could see Docket back in a rematch on the dirt, against Midnight Trace.